the end of the last video, we had just decided there was not a GCF in this, besides one. And so we did the AC method, 8 times 1, got 8. So we were looking for factors of 8, reading the problem backwards, that add to 6, and we had picked 2 and 4. So next we look at the signs. The only way to get a positive is a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. So that tells me the signs will be the same. And then I look here and that says they'll both be positive. So we do the problem backwards. We do this, we read it backwards, add to 6. We do this sign first, which says they're either same or different. When it's minus, just like above, it was different. When it's plus, same. Then we go to the middle sign, and that tells us either the larger number sign or what they'll both be. So from above, we learned then you replace the middle term. So I'm taking 6x out and replacing it with plus 2x plus 4x, which is still 6x. So when I rewrite it, it looks like this: 8x squared plus 2x plus 4x plus 1. Then I check to make sure it's a valid substitution. Is 2x plus 4x 6x? Yes, it is. And then the minute I see 4 terms, that should make you think of grouping. We learned back in section 4.5 the only factoring patterns we know for 4 terms are grouping. So I group these two and these two. Here my GCF is 2 and x to the first. So I divide each term by that. I put the 2x outside. And when I divide, I get 8 divided by 2, 4. 2 minus 1, x. And then my next, 2x divided by 2x. Anything divided by itself is 1. Don't leave it blank. Don't write 0. Anything divided by itself is 1. So there's my first GCF. Then I always bring down the next sign. So the sign in the middle is what comes down. And then I look here and I go, oh, well, the only thing these guys have in common is 1. Well, 1 can be a GCF. So I put a 1 outside, divide each of these by 1, and I get 4x plus 1. And then this is when we get excited. Yay, our parentheses match, because remember, if they don't match, we can't go on. That means we made a mistake. So don't keep working the problem like, oh, maybe this one doesn't come out. They have to match. If they don't, you need to go back and check here for errors. So our third GCF is 4x plus 1. So we bring it out, cross it out. Whatever's left is in the second parenthesis. And then to check it, let's say you're kind of in a rush and you want to check it, you can just do a quick FOIL. 8x squared, boom. 4x plus 2x, yep, that's 6x. And L of FOIL, 1. So you just add your outer and inner together. So outer's 4x, inner's 2x. 4x plus 2x is 6x. Last is 1. Put a check mark and go, yes, I know I got that one right. Nice, huh? So you will be doing that kind of factoring, that and 4.5 more than any other factoring in the book. So this is a huge, huge section to make sure you learn and know and practice. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next section, or next page, page 6. And the reason this is written out is because I made the whole video and then my computer froze. So the first 3 problems are already written out. Sorry about that. So this one, I look for a GCF. And I say, no, there isn't one. So then I do A times C. 6 times 7 is 42. And remember, ignore the sign. We do the signs on the next step here. So we're just looking for factors of 42. Now read the problem backwards. That's subtract to 11. So I go over here, factors of 42, that subtract to 11. So 1 and 42, does that subtract to 11? No. 2 and 21, does that subtract to 11? No. 3 and 14, ding, ding, ding. Now we do our signs. So we go from back to front. This says the signs will be different. And we learn this is a sign of the larger number. So when we look over here, we go, okay, one has to be plus, one has to be minus, and the larger number has to be negative. So when I have a choice, I always put the negative first. So I'm going to rewrite this as 6x squared minus 14x plus 3x minus 7. So the reason I like my negative first is then I don't have to have a negative GCF, which I know when that's the case, students make less errors. So that's why I always put the negative first if I have a choice. So the only time I wouldn't have a choice is if they're both negative, then I'm not going to be able to prevent having that negative there. But if you wrote plus 3x minus 14x, and I wrote minus 14x plus 3x, we still get the same answer. Doesn't matter which one you put first. And the reason why, negative 14x plus 3x is negative 11x. So order doesn't matter. Once I get it turned into 4 terms, then I go, oh, this is grouping. So I immediately jump into grouping. And I say, what is the GCF? 2 and then x to the first. So I pull that out, divide each term by 2x, and I get 3x minus, here the x's cancel, 7. Then I bring down the plus sign, and I look at the last 2 terms, and I go, oh, nothing's common except 1. So remember, I do have to pull the 1 out because this is my second element in my second parenthesis, so you can't leave it blank. If nothing's common but 1, write 1. When you divide each of those by 1, you get 3x minus 7. So remember, grouping has 3 GCFs. So the first one was 2x. The second one was 1. Now we have a GCF that's a binomial. So 3x minus 7, those match. So we pull that out in front, cross it out because it's been taken out. And then in the second parentheses, write what's left, 2x plus 1. And there we have it. And we can do another quick check. 6x squared, yes. Negative 14x plus 3x is negative 11x. And then from L, negative 7. So we can walk away and go, yes, I know I have that one right. So I think it's time for you to do one on your own. I'm going to give you a hint though. I've highlighted this because it is a test question, so it's a good one to practice on. But this one has a GCF at the beginning, so you have to take that GCF out before you do any of this. So go ahead and shut off your video and do that problem, but just remember to take a GCF out in front first and then do AC method on what's left. Okay? So join me when you're done and we can check that. Okay, as I said earlier, the GCF's 4, so we pull it out in front and divide every term by 4, and we get 6x squared minus 1x minus 1. And at this point in the game, I do put the 1 in front of the x. I don't on an answer, but on this I do, because we're going to be saying factors of 6 that subtract a 1. And students that don't have the 1 in there do factors of 6 that subtract to x. There are no factors of 6 that subtract to x. You can't get an x when you subtract numbers. So you should be saying factors of 6 that subtract to 1. And it is AC method, because even though I took the 4 out, I still have a number in front that's not 1. So I multiply 6 times 1, and I get 6. And then I read the problem backwards, factors of 6 that subtract to 1. So then I go over here and write that, factors of 6 that subtract to 1. And you'd be surprised how many people pick 6 and 1. 6 and 1 subtract to 5. They don't subtract to 1. But 3 and 2 do subtract to 1. So now let's look at the sign. So we look over here and we say, oh, that negative at the end, the only way to get a negative is when one's positive and one's negative. So that tells me the signs are negative, because a positive times a negative is negative. And this says of the two numbers, make sure the larger one's negative. So then I went over here and made 3 negative and 2 positive. So now I'm taking the negative 1x out, and I'm replacing it with negative 3x plus 2x. So this is a mistake that I see a lot on the test, because like I said, I put this one on the test, is students get the 4 all mixed up in the AC method. Don't do that. The 4 has to remain part of the answer, but it has no part of the AC. So what I tell students to do is put it out in front of brackets. So you'll keep carrying it down, but it'll be outside the brackets, so you won't pay attention to it. So now I'm going to rewrite this, 6x squared minus 3x plus 2x minus 1. And so you look at it and you go, well, how can you do that? How can you change it like that? Well, how I can do that is because negative 3x plus 2x is still negative 1x. Yes, I made it look different. I turned it into 4 terms, but I haven't changed the value. I can still get the old problem back. And like I said, if I have a choice of putting my negative first, I do. So here my GCF is going to be 3 and x. So I pull it out. So I still have the 4 outside brackets. Then I pull a 3x out. And I divide each of these by 3x. And I get 2x to the first minus 1. Anything divided by itself is 1. Then I bring that sign over. Plus, here the GCF is 1. When I divide each of these by 1, I get 2x minus 1. So now I say, oh, I have matching binomials. So I bring the 4 down. I bring down the GCF 2x minus 1. I cross them out because I already have them written. And then in the second parentheses, I write what's left. So on that one, when you were going to check it, you would FOIL first, then multiply by the 4 to make sure you get that back. In this bottom part, we're going to cross out. I can tell you, I've been teaching a really long time, so I've tried a lot of different things. And I used to teach a second method on how to do these problems, and the students got the 2 methods totally mixed up. Like they do part of this method, part of that. So I'm like, okay, which one's easiest for students to learn? AC. So I'm going to teach them that, and then later on I'll come back to this.